prominent Black Lives Matter leader hitting back at a Democrat who's been critical of the group. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has slammed BLM for being silent on the rising violence that impacts Black Americans. Hawk Newsome, co-founder of BLM of New York, responding to Adams while speaking to Dana today.
So let's get back to Eric Adams, this mayor who is a Democrat, but he spews conservative and Republican talking points. He's a white man in blackface and a very conservative-minded white man. He had 16 shooting victims on a train, and they say, "What are you going to do about policing?" And he says, "What about BLM?" Is America not smart enough to see him deflecting?
The BLM leader is also taking time to defend the defund the police movement after reports that the movement led to a startling spike in the murders of Black Americans.
The cops are not the answer. Poor people commit crimes out of desperation. Address the poverty. The Republicans don't care. But they'll say, we'll teach you. They'll say, we'll teach you to empower yourselves. Democrats want to keep us handicapped and crippled and on welfare.
All right, Judge, I want to go to you first because I want to hit the actual heart of this issue and not just how he can be sometimes on TV, as Dana saw today. He says that Adams' plan is a monumental failure. He says 4 months into it that most of the arrests through the plainclothes officers program are petty crimes, and what he says the DA is prosecuting is just violations. So he says that's a failure and that Adams' policies aren't making the city any safer.
Well, first of all, I don't know if that's the case, number one. I don't know if street crime cops or the anti-crime unit, as it's been called historically, is there for petty crimes. That's number one. Number two, I found it fascinating that we just closed with him saying, the Republicans, they'll teach you how to help. Well, they'll teach us and they'll try to help us, but the Democrats won't do anything. I mean, I'm not sure what he wants, but here's the bottom line. We can blame the death of Black Americans on the Black Lives Matter movement to defund the police. It is that simple. There is a statistical reality to the fact that once that movement started with defund police, more Blacks and minorities in the inner cities were being murdered. The stats do not lie. And what shocks me is that the people who joined the movement, which I have no problem with, I think the movement is good, the organization is not, but that joined the movement, why aren't they saying, where is our money? Where are the donations? Where are the pledges? Why aren't we helping Black lives and not just those ones that they want to highlight as significant and awful, those that involve police? Activists look the other way when it comes to Black lives, and I don't have a lot of respect for that guy. I'm sorry. You ought to be out there fighting for all Black victims, and maybe he thinks he is, but as far as I'm concerned, is Adams deflecting? Yeah, I think he deflects. I don't think Adams has done a great job in the first 100 days. I think the first time he talked about really making sure we get people was when the guy on the train. And so we have a decision to make. We either keep pressuring him to protect us or we just move on to someone else.
Harold, one thing he did say, he says that they believe that the mother of the mother of crime is poverty. So as he went through the interview, as Dana saw, some of his talking points were a little bit less incendiary and a little bit more careful, I guess. But he says that basically the only reason there's crime in New York City is that because there's poverty in New York City and that police can't be the answer.
Well, I differ with him on a couple of fronts. Number one, I think Mayor Adams is not what he described. Number two, I differ a little bit with what the judge said about the BLM being responsible for all these things, but I do agree with your overall point, Judge, that the movement is certainly something I support more than some of the individuals. But that young fellow has a right to share his views. He was on the show, and I just disagree with him. I think at the end of the day, my father grew up poor, grew up one of 15. They didn't go out killing people and robbing and looting. They went and got an education and thank God, raised families. To say that poor people, it's an indictment on poor people to say that. It's an indictment on lower middle class and middle class people to say that. So I think I understand what he's trying to say, that we need better policies to help empower communities, to provide jobs and education opportunities and health care. But that's not the way you say it. What we need in this city and what other cities need, we need federal crime task forces working with our local officials. We need more cops on the streets. We need more dollars for training police officers so we can avoid some of the tragedies that we've seen in the nation over the last year and a half or two. And finally, we need to lock up people who commit crimes. Any Democrat, again, this bail reform, I think the mayor has been outright against it. He's been to Albany protesting and advocating against the law. I would encourage Governor Hochul and others, if you want to get reelected, reform bail. It was a benign thing to do early on to try to figure out how you get nonviolent offenders and don't let them go to jail. But a violent offender should stay in jail, period. That's what every organization who wants to fight crime should be stating.
Greg, this guy's appointed himself as the leader of the BLM movement in New York. Is the same guy that said there'll be blood on the streets if Mayor Adams was elected.
I mean, BLM has done to black people what Chris Wallace did to CNN Plus. Entice them with a promise and then ditch them on the side of the road. I'm going to do this every segment, so just get used to it. Look, number one, everything Harold said is correct, and the judge is right. We have the highest crime in 30 years. We might have poverty in New York City, but we have the highest taxes in the country. So you can't blame poverty. You have to blame the corrupt liberal leaders. And when you look at these high crime cities, there's one singular example that's there in each one: single party rule. You got to have, and this is a poor analogy, you got to have a mom and a dad, and you got to have a Republican, and you got to have a Democrat. One can be more powerful than the other, but they're checks and their balances. There's like, if you let Democrats run everything, the very worst intentions will come to light. And I'd say the same thing about Republicans. They got to balance each other out. New York City has no Republican counterpoint. If you look at places like Chicago or Los Angeles, that's missing. So what happens is the very worst ideas bubble up. Like the bail reform thing was a terrible idea. That wouldn't have come through if there was a kind of a balance between left and right. You got to have the mom and the dad politically together to create this. And also the last thing about the crime is, you look at places like CNN and other media, they did champion the demoralization of the police. They bought into it, and that fueled the first ever national Ferguson effect, which is when law enforcement pulls back, and that led to more crime and the crime epidemic. So you can definitely say that the media had a large responsibility. It's not entirely BLM. It's the way their message was mutated by the media.
Dana, when you guys ask him about the $6 million mansion that a BLM leader, Patrice Cullors, bought and really can't answer, he gave really examples of what his organization is doing here in New York City that's much different than that.
Well, he also was he was somebody who blew the whistle on the fundraising and how they were spending the money. And he said that you have to be able to separate the two.
Yeah.
And I just think in the public's mind, that is difficult to do. You don't have that you're taking in all of this information. That's hard to do. Now, I also think that he has a good point about something. He said there's things that he's done in his neighborhood, which is local solutions, local control. That makes a lot of sense. One of them is, for example, they opened a Montessori school that apparently is doing great things. I said, I'll come to visit. I'd love to do it. But he said that none of the media will come and cover that story, but they'll cover his other comments. Well, part of the reasons they cover those comments is because they're so incendiary.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, having just in the last 3 weeks interviewed Mayor Adams and then Hawk Newsome, I'm like, wait, if you guys got in a room, you actually agree on a lot more.
Yeah.
For example, Mayor Adams is saying that like what de Blasio did with the public schools was horrible, and he's trying to reverse some of those things. That's something Hawk Newsome agrees with. So there is an opportunity for these two leaders. One is elected, one is appointed, but they're obviously charismatic people that if you could just figure out a way to get them in a room and bring them together, they might be able to achieve a lot more.
Incendiary by design. We just did a whole segment on him.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.